Hey, church family, James here. We are working our way through the Psalms, day 39, which means Psalm 39. Now, as you read it, pay particular attention to verse 4, probably the most famous verse of this psalm. O Lord, make me know my end, and what is the measure of my days? Let me know how fleeting I am. It's interesting that in this psalm, David prays that the Lord would make him aware of the fact that life is brief, that ultimately life will come to an end. Our days can be measured, and ultimately they are but a few handbreadths. Our lives are as nothing on the scale of God and eternity. Life is like a breath, like a shadow. Now, our culture tends to ignore this fact. We live in a day that does its best not to think about death or the brevity of life. Although, of course, in recent days, we've been confronted with this reality throughout this COVID 19 season. Every day, every night on the news, we're hearing the latest death numbers and so on, and we mourn and weep these things, but there's a sense in which being reminded about the brevity of life is not a bad thing. In fact, David prays that he would be reminded about the brevity of life. Why? Because for David, it doesn't lead to despair. Sounds like a morbid thing to think about, right? How short your life is. But for David, it doesn't lead to despair. It actually leads to David putting his hope in God. In other words, being confronted with the brevity of life leads you to hope in the right things. Wakes you up, a bit of a reality check, stops you from putting so much time and energy and focus into these fleeting things that in the end aren't going to last. Our reputations, our possessions, our success, all these kind of things. Instead, reflecting on the brevity of life brings kind of reality, but also a healthy perspective, calling us to put our hope in things that ultimately will never disappoint. And we know the only thing that will never disappoint is God Himself. So, in this season, when we're perhaps confronted with the brevity of life more than normal, let's make the most of that to consider whether we've really set our hope in God. Psalm 39. Read through it just now. O Lord, make me know my end, and what is the measure of my days.